Hey guys, Eli here. Welcome to my review of Relay. Relay is a 2024 American film directed by David Mackenzie and stars Riz Ahmed, Lily James, Sam Worthington, and Willa Fitzgerald. Plot follows a mysterious man that works as a middleman that provides a service for whistleblowers looking to work out a deal with the powerful companies that they had once worked for. Which is a really solid premise on its own, but it's how this story is put together that made it a really engaging watch for me, at least. While it's not perfect, this is a really cool movie and a bit of a breath of fresh air for me. You might hear me say that a couple times in this review. So you have Ash, a kind of like a fixer of sorts who provides a service for whistleblowers through complete anonymity. Anonymity? That word is so fucking hard to say. But his clients never meet him face to face. That is basically his business model, and this is where it gets really interesting for me. This is one of the things that makes this film unique is because he uses a telecommunications device used by deaf people, and then he uses it through a relay service to communicate with his clients back and forth. So that way, it's completely anonymous. And I had previously seen this film described as a 90s style thriller, which is something I do have nostalgia for. I think most people my age that grew up in the 90s definitely have nostalgia for that, whether thrillers are, one of our favorite genres to this day or not, which they aren't really mine. But yeah, and I did like the trailer, so I was definitely intrigued. The beginning shows a man who had just finished his dealings with Ash. You see him meet up with his former employer, or at least a representative of the employer, I imagine, and they discuss that the transaction is complete. And you don't really completely know what's going on yet, and it's clever, solid writing that does not hold your hand or spoon feed the story to you right from the start, which I liked. You actually have to pay attention and trust the script to do its job, and it does. I really did like the first act the most, though. The nighttime New York City setting, the kind of espionage spy movie vibes, albeit on a kind of a different, smaller scale. The tension, the genuine curiosity as to where things go next. What is Ash's next job? And for a while, you don't really see Ash speak, and you kind of wonder what his character will be like. Will his personality, be kind of hidden to keep him as the shadowy figure, as in a lot of these types of, spy movies, espionage movies, whatever you want to call them. And I would have been okay with that, but there is actually some character development here to Ash. You get to know him a little bit, like how he's a recovering alcoholic. You guys know I love that shit. There's a scene where he goes to an AA meeting, and he's really so much more than what you would expect. He talks about what it was like to be a Muslim living in New York City after 9/11, and I just really appreciated that. It's not a long scene, but it's just enough. And I think, what made it so effective for me was that you didn't at all see it coming. And it very much humanizes Ash in a way that a lot of movies like this probably would have avoided. And one of the things that interested me about the trailer was that it had a lead in Riz Ahmed that I was not really at all familiar with. I'm not going to get into semantics or anything, but you don't see a lot of people like him in like American action or thriller movies, and I was curious. By the way, I did see the Phoenician Scheme earlier this year, and I became an instant fan of Riz Ahmed. I just didn't know it was the same guy. So yeah, it was cool to see him again. Anyways, if Wes Anderson wants to work with you, I'll be paying attention. And also, I decided to look him up, look into his filmography and stuff, and he is a British Pakistani rapper. So I would say that his New York accent in Relay was very convincing. Maybe it's just me. I'm no expert on accents or anything, but I'm already looking more, forward to seeing more of Riz Ahmed. So, anyways, Ash's life kind of changes when he's contacted by Sarah, played by Lily James, who I really liked, and I actually have liked her in everything that I've seen so far. Anyways, here's another interesting fact about this movie: is that Sarah Grant. This is just something I noticed, but I think she's the only character in the film, like the entire film, out of the more prominent characters, that has their first and last name revealed. All of the other characters either have their first name, like if you look it up on IMDb, they have their first names listed, so they go by their first name or their last name only, never both. Maybe there's something there with Sarah. Maybe there's a reason why she is listed as Sarah Grant. I'm not really sure. So she had recently worked for a scientific research company and had discovered evidence of a company cover-up that could be like really harmful to the public and all that. And she just can't, in good conscience, be quiet about it. And after, several law offices not wanting to touch the case, she's referred to Ash. I gotta say, I loved how Sarah and Ash communicate. Without knowing each other at all, it just seemed really fresh to me. And the atmosphere was just right, pretty much throughout most of this movie. Tension, in the air without being some overblown and overstimulating spectacle, no random explosions or constant gunfire. There's a solid amount of action in this film, don't get me wrong, but that's also kind of where my complaints are, actually. The action scenes, in my opinion, are just not that good. Not for a lack of effort, I don't think. I just think that maybe they needed a better choreographer or whatever. Whoever makes scenes like that better. But to be clear, it's a pretty small complaint, actually. So yeah, the company that Sarah worked for has also hired a counterintelligence team to go after her. At first trying to just use methods of intimidation. And it's 4 people, mostly pretty unassuming, looking crew, but it does include Sam Worthington. Remember that guy? He had a big run in the 2010 or whatever, and then I just didn't see him for 10 or 15 years. And also Willa Fitzgerald, who is good, but kind of an odd choice, I think, for this role. She does okay. And Sam Worthington is very much the leader of the group, and he kind of goes for like Tommy Lee Jones in the Fugitive vibes. At least that's what I thought, and it works pretty well. He puts on his best New York accent, but his actual Australian accent cuts through pretty often. Not really a complaint. It's something that I noticed. Overall, though, I didn't love the counterintelligence team. They seemed kind of ragtag to me a little bit, which also made them feel kind of more realistic. But it was cool not seeing your typical roided out uber masculine commandos or whatever. So I guess there's that. That does add to what I appreciate about this film throughout, though, because it does avoid. In my opinion, it avoids pretty much as many action movie tropes as it could. So like I said, they start with intimidation, but that does escalate into something, much more dangerous as Ash guides Sarah through all of this. Clearly the goal is to silence her by any means necessary. That becomes pretty clear at some point. And in Ash's line of work, there has to be a time where he knows to walk away from a job and a client to avoid being compromised, which, he does say at one point is the hardest part of his job because he truly does want to see his clients walk away safe. So I'm giving Relay a 7 out of 10. Like I said, it was a tight, refreshing watch, and I'd recommend it to fans of stuff like, The Fugitive and smaller 90s thrillers like Breakdown. Also, I gotta say, if anyone's still watching it, and if anyone has seen this movie, was this film sponsored by the United States Postal Office? Because those post office scenes were so weird, so realistic, where they didn't need to be. It just felt like constant advertising. It was strange. Almost a complaint, but not really. I don't know. It was weird. What do you guys think? Cheers, guys, and I'll see you at the multiplex.